I wanted to do this video to really talk about supernatural success. It's like, God, I don't know which direction I should go in. I find that God lines things up. And I mean, oh my goodness, I have so many examples that I could talk about. Tell me, Courtney, teach me. How can I do this? How can I get God on the hotline? You are in luck because we're gonna get into it right now. Hey, CourtneyLSanders here. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new to me, I'm a full-time online life and business coach, as well as wife and mom. I wear all the hats and do all the things, but I would not be able to do it if it weren't for the grace of God. And I am super honest about that. You'll never have me out here saying like, oh, I did this, all on my own. Yes, I worked very hard. Yes, there's a lot of things that I've done and that I'm continuing to do, but I rely on my faith very, very heavily. And I am super grateful for all the things that God has done in my life. And so in that vein, I wanted to do this video to really talk about supernatural success and how I really tapped into my faith and again, leaned on my relationship with God to get that extra edge in business and really create supernatural success in my life. So if you are a person of faith and you're like, you know what, tell me, Courtney, teach me, how can I do this? How can I get God on the hotline? You are in luck because we're gonna get into it right now. All right, so the first thing that I do and that I have done is I believe what the Bible says, particularly Proverbs 3:6, where it says, acknowledge the Lord in all your ways and he will make your path straight. I love that because there are many times where I thought that something was the right direction and my path was kind of crooked, right? But I find that when I submit these things to God in prayer, or I'm just like, God, I don't know which direction I should go in, I find that God lines things up. And I mean, oh my goodness, I have so many examples that I could talk about. Even where I am right now in my business in the season of really building a team, that is definitely something that I brought to the Lord in prayer and was like, hey, I'm struggling here. It's very difficult for me to, manage all of these different arenas because it's just me and I'm just by myself. And so lo and behold, out of the woodwork, I started connecting with people and really like God brought me an amazing team that I could not have found on my own had that not been a part of my prayer life. So it doesn't matter what you are doing in business. You might think it's too small, or like, I don't want to bother God with that. I know a lot of us have this like, oh, that's like small. I should be praying about something bigger. Even if it's small, even if it's, what should I post on social media? What should my content be about? How can I get a team and get some support? How can I manage the different things going on in my life? Truly, again, I believe the Bible and I believe the verse where it says, acknowledge the Lord in all your ways. It doesn't say just, the big life decisions, but not the small things. No, it says in all your ways and he'll make your path straight. So that is something that I lean on. That is really like a life verse for me. And that has made all the difference in my business. All right, the next thing that I've done, which I kind of alluded to in the previous step, is I pray very specific prayers, right? I actually talked about this in my podcast, which you can check out here, where I talk about the truth about marriage and motherhood. And I talked about this prayer that I asked God when it came to how early I should wake up. And by the way, if you haven't watched that video, you should totally watch it. I'm not going to tell you how early God told me I should wake up, but watch that video because it's kind of crazy and it's kind of a crazy story how that came about. But that's just an example of how I pray very, very specific prayers in order to get clarity, in order to get answers. And in fact, even this situation with needing a team that I talked about previously and how I was feeling really overwhelmed, I was really specific where I was like, Lord, I need someone who can help me manage these particular areas in my business. This is where I feel like, work is not getting done and things aren't as tight and tidy as I need. And so if you could send me somebody who has this particular expertise and can do these particular things, like that would make all the difference. And so I find that praying those specific prayers, again, God will answer them. Even my specific prayer about, God, what time should I wake up? And again, I got that answer in that podcast that you could check out to find out what that was. It's because I pray very, very specific prayer. So I know, again, it could feel like, oh, I'm just gonna pray a vague, like, oh Lord, make my business successful. And I do that as well. I mean, that's my general prayer. Make my business successful, keep my family safe and healthy, help me, raise my children in a godly way. Like, these big, very broad prayers, but whether it's in my business or in my personal life, I also drill down and I pray very, very specific prayers about very detailed things that are happening in my life, in my business, because again, I'm believing that first verse about acknowledging the Lord in all of your ways. How can I acknowledge him in all of my ways if I'm not being specific about the way that I am trying to go, that I need him to make the path very straight on? So make sure that you are praying very, very specific prayers. Tell God exactly what you need and you'll be shocked that he will actually answer. All right, the next thing that I do in order to experience supernatural success, and this is something that I admittedly struggled with a long time. Gratefully, I struggled with this before I had my kids, but when I was a newlywed and I was just getting acclimated to like the role of being a wife, I really struggled with this, and this is putting your family first. So I had been working on my blog and my business even when my husband and I were dating. And so obviously once we got married and I was still really focusing on my business, I'll admit that there was this kind of like wobbly period. Not that our marriage was bad or anything like that, but there was this period where for me, I felt very conflicted because I wanted to go all in on my business the way I was used to, where I could just focus on that exclusively. And you know, before I got married, if I wanted to spend all weekend focusing on my business, I didn't really have to answer to anybody. I could just do that because that was my priority. But now that I was married and I was like, oh man, I'm a wife. Like, I guess I need to pay attention to him, right? I guess I, should do wifely things and be available. But I'm like, oh, but I'm really growing my business. I really felt that there was this tension and this conflict. And in fact, I talk about this in more detail in a free talk that you can check out called The Powerhouse. This is actually a recording of a talk that I did in Dallas, and it touches on a lot of things: feminine power, marriage, managing your business, and not motherhood at the time because I wasn't a mother, but I was married at that time. So that's definitely something you should totally check out. So if that's of interest to you, you can click the link below in order to learn more about The Powerhouse. But it got to a point where I basically just had to lay this down and say, what would God have me do? And I think the obvious answer is God would have me focus on my family first, right? And at the time, my husband was my immediate family because it was just us. We didn't have kids. But I'm really glad that God, whipped me into shape around that, because then after I started having kids, having my son, and then having my daughter, I had already built up that faith muscle where, I can focus on my family, and it doesn't mean that everything is going to fall apart. And so I know a lot of very ambitious women, working women like me, right, really struggle with that because you want to do these amazing things in the world. And it can be very easy to really let the enemy get in your head and make you think like, oh, see, this is why you can't be successful. Your family's taking up all your time. Why your husband asking you for this? He should be doing this on his own. And why the kids never leave you alone? Can you ever get a break? Like, all of that negative conversation can convince you that your family is actually like a disadvantage and your family is your enemy compared to your dreams and the things that you actually want to do. But if your dreams are God-given dreams, yes, even if they're business dreams, even if they're financial dreams, you want to make a lot of money, you want to be successful, etc., you want to impact the world, if they are God-given dreams, God is not going to make you choose between the two of them, right? But God is very clear about He wants us to put our family first, right? Our family is our first ministry. And so this is where that supernatural success comes into play, because if you put your family first, on paper, it might not make sense. On paper, you might be like, okay, if I put my family first, like, God, I'm literally not gonna have enough time in order to run this business. I'm not gonna have enough time in order to do these things. But again, God can do anything. God can make it, incredible. And in fact, I just thought about this. If you want to see this in action, I actually highly recommend reading the book, The Magnolia Story by Chip and Joanna Gaines. Now, full disclosure, I love them as a couple, but I'm not like a super fan of the show. Not that there's anything wrong with the show, but that whole kind of like farmhouse chic look is not really my favorite like interior design look. So I never really watched their Fix or Flip show on HGTV, which obviously brought them to, fame and all of that. But I love their story. I love how they put their faith first and how they put their family first. And in that book, it's so good. Like, I almost cried reading it. I don't want to give too much away, but there's a part in the book where Joanna actually came to this same kind of crossroads that I'm talking about, where, she was very ambitious. She was working on a particular business project and it was being successful, but her family needed her, and she had to make a decision of if she was going to put her family first and if she was going to put her business first. And so she put her family first, but in putting her family first, God blew up her business, right? And so now we know, like, the Magnolia, company is like an empire, right? They have their own network. They basically own Waco, Texas, right? They have all of these different events and venue, different things going on in Waco. They have all these TV shows, all this merchandise, collaboration line with Target. That's an example of what I'm talking about how God can supernaturally like blow on what you have going on, but you have to be willing to do things in the proper order. So if you are, someone who's struggling with putting your family first, but you want to do this in a really God-ordained way, I'm telling you, just bite the bullet and put your family first and trust that God will make a supernatural way for you to be successful in your God-given dreams, if that's what they really are. All right, I have more where that came from, but first I want to hear from you. What's one supernatural success that you're currently believing God for? Share in the comments below. All right, the next thing you need to do, which again, I kind of touched on in the previous point, is you actually need to make space for the supernatural. So I find that we often want to do things in our own strength. And so part of the reason why we feel like, we do have to make these choices, or do I put my family first? Do I put my business first? Or even financially, how am I going to make this work? Is because from a natural standpoint, maybe the numbers don't work out, right? Or maybe the time doesn't work out, or maybe the resources aren't there. But if you make space for the supernatural, you would be amazed that many of the things that you think you need to do, you actually don't need to do, because God has worked it out. And so that has definitely been the case for me. One thing that I really struggle with is believing that I need to do everything myself, right? I'm a fast learner, and I'm pretty good at most things, even brand new things that I've never done before. I can learn it quickly and get really proficient. And so while that is a skill set and a strength, it's also a downfall, because my reflex is not to have somebody else do it. My reflex is to do it myself, because I'm pretty confident that if I just spend the time learning it, I can get up to speed pretty quickly. And so for me, oftentimes I get very overwhelmed, because I'm like, man, there's this new thing I need to do, and I need to teach myself how to do this or figure out how I can do it. Where if I make space for the supernatural, oftentimes I don't need to know how to do it, because God will bring me an amazing who, right? He'll bring me a person. And so that was definitely the case, even when I was struggling with some back-end things in my business, and I felt like I needed a team and I was overwhelmed. A lot of that was because I was trying to do all the things myself, and I was trying to figure out how to do it. But then God brought me amazing people where I didn't have to learn how to do it. They just do it for me. And so now there's a lot of processes that happen in my business where I'm like, oh, great. They took care of that. I'm not involved with it. I have a high level view of how they do it, but I'm not in the weeds. I don't know how it gets done, but it gets done consistently, because I have these people, again, that God supernaturally brought into my life who have done amazing, amazing work for me. So make sure that you are creating space for the supernatural, and that you don't think that it all is dependent on you, or dependent on the amount of money you have, or the resources, or anything like that, because God truly can make a way out of no way. All right, the next thing you want to do if you want to experience supernatural success is you want to read the Bible for business lessons. Yes, it's not just a spiritual book from the standpoint of what you need to do in your relationship with God, but even on a practical level, what you need to do in your marriage, how you need to parent your kids, and yes, how you need to even run your business. And so I was really amazed when I started to read the Bible from that light. There's a lot of good wisdom in there, right? There's a lot of good leadership strategies, a lot of really great business advice. And I remember one thing that really caught my attention and really taught me that I needed to put my family first was actually when I was reading Proverbs 31. So if you're not familiar, Proverbs 31 is a famous chapter in the book of Proverbs in the Bible, and it talks about this idealized woman, this woman who is very successful in business. She does all these amazing things in her community, but she's also very successful in her home life. It says her children rise up and call her blessed, and her husband loves her, and she's just really this idealized woman. And so I remember reading the verses around that, and I noticed there was something different about how she oriented her day versus how I oriented my day, right? And so in that, in those passages in the book of Proverbs, it talks about how one, she gets up early, and two, she provides portions for her staff. I think in the Bible it calls it maidens, or her servant girls, but basically she creates provisions for her staff. So she makes sure that they're together, and then she makes sure that her family has what they need. And then she jumps into her day and does her work and all of that. And I realized that I kind of had it backwards, where I was waking up and I was jumping into all the things that I needed to do for my business, and I would be frustrated that either things at home or even things that my team needed was not getting taken care of. And so again, that's some very simple advice just from watching how she was able to do this. But it was no, okay, she gets portions for her staff, right? So that means make sure that her staff needs what they, or has what they need in order to show up and do their work. So I reoriented things where it was okay, let me focus on making sure that if I am outsourcing things, if I'm delegating, if I'm working with a team, let me make sure that the first thing I do in my day is make sure that they have what they need. And then once I know that they have what they need, then I make sure that the household is together. And then once those two things are taken care of, then I can proceed and jump into my business. And it really makes a lot of sense if you think about it, because if you focus on making sure that your staff has what they need, they can handle the business things for you, while you are then diving in and making sure that the household stuff is taken care of. And then when the household stuff is taken care of, then you can dive into your business work, and everything is how it should be, and you're not being frustrated or feeling things aren't together. So that's just an example of a simple tip that I got from the Bible that really was a game changer for me in my own business. So the Bible has amazing business lessons. Definitely read it and apply it, and you will see how your life and business change. All right, thanks so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, you're gonna love my Grace Over Grind guide. Now, this is a guide that I put together actually a few years ago when I was first learning a lot of these lessons, but it really talks about how to get some of this grace in your life versus feeling like you have to grind it out all the time. So if that is something that you are struggling with, I believe that this Grace Over Grind guide is really gonna help you. You can click the link below in order to access it. It's completely free. And again, if you love this video, you will love that guide as well. So click the link below to check it out. All right, thanks so much for watching this video. If you loved it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you can't wait for my next video, make sure that you're subscribed to my podcast, The Courtney Sanders Show, on both iTunes and Spotify. And if you can't wait for my next podcast episode or my next YouTube video, make sure you're following me on Instagram. It's CourtneyLSanders on Instagram. And with that, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.